Cronkite News starts now.
Good evening and welcome to Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Jordan Spurgeon. Thank you for joining us. Arizona has now reached more than 1 million COVID-19 cases. The state passed the grim milestone after more than 3,700 cases were reported on Friday. This makes Arizona the 13th U.S. state to hit that level of cases since the first case reported in January of last year. State health officials also reported 63 more COVID-related deaths on Friday. Hospitals are continuing to urge people to wear their masks and get vaccinated. The rise in cases comes during a heated debate in court over whether shots and masks should be required. A new study published in journal Nature figured out how many people were affected by COVID-19 last year. It showed that 1 in 3 Americans had the virus by the end of 2020, but a shortage of COVID tests caused less than 1/4 of those cases to be recorded. Columbia University researchers created a model that imitated the way that the virus spreads. This model, along with population, mobility, and case data, allowed them to find more accurate numbers. The study also found that there were less deaths when public health measures were taken, like mandating masks. This week's especially hot temperatures served as a backdrop for a call to action on climate change. As Rob Winder reports, advocates say one particular group bears an especially heavy burden.
Community leaders and environmental advocates are calling on Arizona Senators Kyrsten Sinema and Mark Kelly to support plans for investments in green jobs and infrastructure, particularly for the benefit of Arizona seniors.
Climate change is a public health emergency for all of us, but especially older people. In Arizona, the heat and air quality probably have the greatest impact on the health of older residents, but the combination can be life-debilitating, life-threatening.
Community advocates say seniors who are unsheltered are especially vulnerable to the effects of extreme heat in Arizona. According to the Justice Center, last year, more than 200 unsheltered seniors died in Maricopa County, and heat was a contributing factor in many of their deaths.
236 of your unsheltered neighbors died. They were ages 55 to 101. 101 dying on the streets for lack of shelter, for lack of shade, for lack of a place to lay our head.
While they believe the increasing threats of climate change are dire, Hazel Chandler of Elders for Climate Action is optimistic about the increased sense of urgency to tackle the problem.
I'm hopeful for the first time in 50 years, because what I see is people all around us making their voices heard.
In Phoenix, Rob Winder, Cronkite News.
The Justice Center in downtown Phoenix has expanded the hours of their cooling center to 5 p.m. And while normally the center serves those 55 and older, their doors are currently open to anyone who needs a place to cool off. They say heat does not discriminate, and neither do they. The pandemic created extra pressure on bars and restaurants. In the look back, we will see how coronavirus impacted their businesses.
Meanwhile, restaurants have been trying their absolute best to get back to business as usual after Governor Doug Ducey lifted the mask mandate and opened businesses without restrictions. Reporter Julia Sandor got a look at how some places in the valley are handling this situation.
When the pandemic started, restaurants were hit hard. And after a year of takeout and delivery, they are opening their doors back up with no restrictions.
We've had some push and pull effect since lifting of the mask mandate and the restrictions last week. However, that all being said, I think we're going to experience that for a few weeks, and restaurants trying to accommodate guests to the best of their ability, those who want to wear a mask and those who don't. And it's going to be a little bumpy, but I think we'll find our way.
And even though restaurants seem to be getting back to normal, behind closed doors, they are facing another problem. According to the Arizona Restaurant Association, 89% of restaurant operators laid off or furloughed their employees due to COVID.
So we had about, I would almost say 80 to 100 staff. And I would say we probably had, once the pandemic fully hit, we probably had 20. If that, that's front and back of house. So that's cooks and everything too. So we had to lay a lot of people off.
But as places like Bobby Q are transitioning to more dining, they hope for a steady increase in employees and revenue.
Needs so far now, especially with business picking up and all this stuff, regulations going down, we have needed more and more people. and it's been tough to find people to work, to be honest with you. I probably had 16 interviews scheduled in the last week or two, and probably about 5 people have showed up. So,
Julia Sandor, Cronkite News.
As businesses begin to open back up, you may notice that your favorite local restaurant or bar isn't open anymore. Abigail Verwick shows us how one bar in Tempe is ready for business thanks to its patrons.
The Palo Verde, or PV Lounge, first opened its doors in 1961. The bar became a neighborhood staple and had no plans to close until COVID-19. It was tough to convince the owner, Chuck Marthaler, to accept help from friends and neighbors.
And, it's kind of a pride thing. I have a hard time asking for help. I don't like to ask for money. But if that didn't happen, there's no way we could be approaching the goals that we're trying to do with reopening.
Unable to qualify for federal relief funds, Marthaler would deliver drinks to make ends meet.
But the bottom line is, when you're closed for nearly a year, there's really not a lot you can do. And so I told him, I said, the community really loves this bar. It's a staple in our neighborhood. And I bet if we did ask for a little bit of help, financial and, people to come help work in the bar, get it ready to go, I was like, you would get that support.
The response was huge. Volunteers even offered electrical and carpentry skills to get the bar into a COVID-friendly state. Other small businesses in Tempe joined in to save the PV. Foxtail Salon held a haircut fundraiser. Marthaler now understands what this bar means to the community. It's more than just a place to grab a drink. It's a family.
It's just, it feels really good to see that a lot of people care. And, especially during this time when you don't get to see anybody and you feel alone, So I don't feel alone anymore.
Bishop sees the community coming together as an example.
I would hope, if anything, that other communities that are out there, they're struggling, they see their little bar or their restaurant struggling, that they can pull together in the same way. Because in these times, I really think that's all that we have.
In Tempe, Abigail Verwick, Cronkite News.
The Palo Verde Lounge plans to reopen April 1st. While social distancing and CDC guidelines will be enforced, the bar will continue to bring people together.
Let's be honest. COVID-19 has created a new way of living in some good and bad ways. Going to our favorite restaurant means instead of us going in to eat, the restaurants come to us at our front doors, courtesy of delivery services. With fewer people dining in, restaurants are finding new ways to adapt to the virtual world. What do you want to title it? Digital kitchen, cloud kitchen, dark kitchen? How about a ghost kitchen? No, the kitchens aren't empty. But the dining room is. On a national level, because of the pandemic, the food industry is down nearly $240 billion, according to the National Restaurant Association. So it's forced businesses to get creative.
We just started this.
That's Basil Osmani, co-founder of Pita Jungle. He and his team started their own ghost kitchen called Asu Salud.
We're, fine-tuning it before we go all out with our digital campaigning, because at the end of the day, that's how the customer will see you.
Menus for ghost kitchens are only available online for delivery or pickup. So what is a ghost kitchen? Well, there are a couple different ways that they can be run. For an already established restaurant, a ghost kitchen would be basically opening a second restaurant within their existing kitchen, allowing them to run 2 different concepts. It saves money and space. And then there's another way of operating a ghost kitchen. Rent out a building and use it solely for delivery and pickup. While it would cost more, it would also allow for more concepts since there's fewer limitations within the kitchen. If a pandemic never happened, would this idea have ever even come to mind?
Definitely not at this time.
Los Sombreros, known for its carnitas, opened up its ghost kitchen, Carnitas Way.
Like, let's just put very minimal costs into the kitchen to get it up and running in Mesa. And then we can run several concepts out of there at the time.
We're gonna try to retrofit a lot of our existing locations with some sort of a ghost concept.
Osmani is sitting in the only current Pita Jungle location that also shares a kitchen with Asu Salud, Tempe. They plan for much more, and for Carnitas Way, Well, it's one step at a time.
Once we get completely going here the next couple months after we get through kind of this busy transition, maybe we'll work on one of the other virtual brands that's in my head. So we'll see.
Whether it's dine in or out, it's always nice to know there are still meals being served. And in this case, right to your living room. Early in the pandemic, Risk and his team did more than just start a ghost kitchen. They turned their locations into grocery stores and took the old school ice cream truck idea and made it their own, a margarita van. If only that came to my neighborhood.
When you think of Phoenix food, you may think about short leash hot dogs, Carolina's burritos, or Pizzeria Bianco, but Cronkite News reporter Tyler Mannion has a story of one chef that thinks differently than most.
The chef you're about to meet uses hand-picked ingredients, goes out to sea to catch some of his own fish, and farms a lot of his own product. So here's my warning. This story may contain mouth-watering images. Cooking is an art for many chefs, but for Brett Vibber, it's more than that.
My nostalgia and my youth and my family.
Vibber grew up near the Salt River Pima Maricopa community. His co-owner, Jaron Bates, grew up in the Navajo Nation. Together, they make up wild Arizona cuisine.
Between those two tribes, I think they would have the biggest influence, but you always want to be honoring any indigenous cuisine wherever.
The team serves dishes to the valley with the freshest ingredients possible.
Over 300 days a year, our crew or myself, we're foraging, in the mountains of Arizona, the deserts of Arizona.
The COVID-19 pandemic helped Vibber realize that sustainable foods aren't just trendy, they are necessary for our future. So he looked back for inspiration to move forward.
The indigenous cultures were the original, stewards of the land, the original stewards of sustainability.
Pop-up dining experiences were the way to go, so he can tell his clients,
hey, we picked this just for your dinner this morning, and these are the only ones we've seen all year, and we're not sure if we're going to see them again.
And it's working. Wild Arizona Cuisine was recently honored in a national magazine, and pop-up experiences sell out every time. But for Vibber, the real success is in the food.
To bring the wild foods back into our cuisine and start seeing, actually what Arizona cuisine can be all about, that's big, that's huge.
It's going back to our roots, Vibber says, and eating sustainable, fresh food that really makes wild Arizona cuisine art. Vibber says eventually the plan is to open a restaurant, but he's having a great time just doing these pop-up experiences for now. In the studio, Tyler Mannion, Cronkite News.
That's it for Cronkite News tonight. Thanks for joining us. We break down streaming services versus movie theaters. Are movie theaters dying off? And are streaming services starting to look a lot like cable? It's all coming up next. For top Arizona stories anytime, go to cronkitenews.azpbs.org.